The year was 2478, and humanity had reached heights that once seemed impossible. Earth, the blue planet, was no longer just a cradle of life, but the heart of an interstellar civilization. The Terran fleet, a symbol of human ingenuity and strength, patrolled the stars with unmatched confidence. Its ships were marvels of engineering, equipped with weapons and shields that made them nearly invincible. Humanity had carved out its place in the galaxy, and it did so without asking for permission. On this particular day, however, something unusual happened. A ship unlike any other appeared near Earth's orbital command center. It wasn't one of the sleek silver vessels of the Terran fleet or the bulky freighters that carried goods between colonies. This ship was massive, dark, and ominous. It looked like a shadow cast across the stars, with jagged edges and glowing red lines running along its hull. The crew at the command center stared at their screens in confusion as alarms began to blare. Commander Alan Hayes stood on the bridge of the orbital station, his sharp eyes scanning the monitors. He was a man in his late 40s with graying hair and a calm demeanor that hid years of experience. Beside him was Lieutenant Clara Bennett, a younger officer known for her quick thinking and analytical mind. She adjusted her uniform nervously as data streamed in about the unknown vessel. "Do we have any identification yet?" Alan asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Negative, sir," replied one of the technicians. "It's not responding to our hails." Clara leaned closer to her console, analyzing the readings. "It's bigger than anything we've seen before. And those energy signatures, they're off the charts." Before anyone could say more, a message came through. It wasn't in words, but in images and symbols that flickered across the main screen. After a moment, the translation software kicked in, converting the alien language into something comprehensible. The message was simple, yet chilling. "We are the Galactic Empire. You will submit." Alan raised an eyebrow. "Submit? To what?" The response came quickly. "To the rule of Emperor Zorath. Your fleet is weak. Your people are insignificant. Surrender now or face annihilation." A murmur rippled through the room. Some laughed nervously, while others exchanged worried glances. Alan turned to Clara. "What do you think?" She hesitated. "It's either a bluff, or they're incredibly arrogant." Alan nodded. "Either way, we can't ignore it." He stepped forward and addressed the room. "Send a reply. Tell them the Terran fleet doesn't bow to anyone." As the message was sent, news of the encounter spread like wildfire across Earth and its colonies. Social media platforms lit up with memes and jokes mocking the so-called Galactic Empire. People gathered in cafes and living rooms, laughing at the absurdity of being told to surrender by some distant tyrant. Even politicians joined in, dismissing the threat as empty posturing. But not everyone found it amusing. Dr. Rachel Morgan, a historian who specialized in ancient civilizations, watched the coverage with growing unease. She had spent years studying how empires rose and fell throughout history, and she knew that arrogance often preceded disaster. That evening, she decided to reach out to Commander Hayes directly. Alan listened patiently as Rachel explained her concerns over a secure video call. "History shows us that when civilizations underestimate their enemies, they pay a heavy price," she said. "This empire might be more dangerous than we realize." "I appreciate your perspective, Doctor," Alan replied. "But right now, all we have is a lot of talk and no action. Until they show us otherwise, I'm inclined to agree with the general sentiment." Rachel sighed. "Just promise me you'll stay vigilant." "I will," Alan assured her. "Thank you for reaching out." Meanwhile, deep within the orbital command center, intelligence officers worked tirelessly to gather more information about the mysterious empire. They traced the origin of the ship to a distant region of space rarely explored by humans. Initial scans suggested that the empire controlled vast territories, far larger than anything the Terran fleet had encountered before. But there was something else, something unsettling. Alan reviewed the findings late into the night, his brow furrowed. There were rumors of advanced weaponry, technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. If these rumors were true, then the Empire's threats might not be as hollow as they seemed. He called Clara into his office to discuss the matter privately. "What do you make of this?" he asked, handing her a tablet with the latest reports. Clara scanned the documents carefully. If even half of this is accurate, we could be in trouble. That's what I thought, Alan said grimly. But we can't let panic spread. For now, we keep this between us. Clara nodded. Agreed. What's our next move? We prepare, Alan said firmly. I want you to lead a reconnaissance mission. Take a small team and see if you can learn more about their capabilities. Be careful, though. If they catch you, things could get ugly. I understand, Clara said, her expression resolute. When do we leave? As soon as possible. Over the next few days, preparations moved swiftly. Clara assembled a team of trusted pilots and engineers, briefing them on the mission's objectives. Meanwhile, Alan worked to rally support among Earth's leaders, urging them to take the threat seriously. But convincing others proved difficult. Many dismissed his warnings as paranoia, pointing to humanity's track record of success against lesser foes. You worry too much, Commander, one senator remarked during a meeting. Let them come. We'll show them why the Terran fleet is the best in the galaxy. Alan forced a smile but felt a pang of frustration. He knew better than anyone that pride could be both a strength and a weakness. As the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was walking blindly into danger. Still, there was no turning back now. Clara's team launched under the cover of darkness, their ship slipping silently into the void of space. Alan watched from the observation deck as they disappeared into the distance. He hoped they would return with answers, and not regrets. Back on Earth, life continued as usual. People went about their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. News outlets played clips of comedians mocking the Empire, while commentators debated whether the whole thing was an elaborate hoax. In the midst of it all, Alan stood firm, preparing for whatever might come next. He didn't know it yet, but the challenge issued by the Galactic Empire would test humanity in ways no one could have imagined. The days following the Empire's challenge were a whirlwind of activity and uncertainty. On Earth, the public reaction remained mixed, with most people brushing off the threat as nothing more than an overblown attempt at intimidation. Social media was flooded with jokes and memes mocking the Galactic Empire, while talk shows debated whether the whole situation was some elaborate prank designed to grab humanity's attention. Yet beneath the surface of this light-hearted dismissal, cracks were beginning to form. Dr. Rachel Morgan spent her days poring over ancient texts and historical records, searching for parallels between humanity's current situation and past civilizations that had faced similar challenges. Her office was cluttered with books and holographic projections of maps showing the rise and fall of empires throughout history. She found herself drawn to one particular example, the Roman Empire, which had once dismissed barbarian tribes as insignificant threats only to be overwhelmed by their sheer numbers and determination. The comparison troubled her deeply. Rachel decided to write a detailed report summarizing her findings and sent it directly to Commander Alan Hayes. She hoped her insights might help sway him and other leaders to take the Empire's threat more seriously. When Alan finally read the report, he couldn't deny the logic behind Rachel's arguments. Still, convincing others remained a daunting task. Political leaders were too busy basking in the glow of public approval to consider the possibility that the Empire might actually pose a real danger. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Clara Bennett and her team were already deep into Imperial space, navigating cautiously through uncharted regions of the galaxy. Their mission was simple yet perilous: gather intelligence on the Empire's forces without being detected. Clara sat in the cockpit of their small reconnaissance vessel, her eyes fixed on the swirling expanse of stars ahead. Beside her was Lieutenant Daniel Brooks, a skilled pilot known for his steady hands and quick reflexes. Rounding out the crew were two engineers, Sophia Lane and Ethan Grant, who worked tirelessly to keep the ship running smoothly. As they approached the edge of the Empire's territory, Clara felt a knot of tension tighten in her stomach. They had modified their ship to blend in with local traffic, but even the smallest mistake could expose them. "Stay sharp," she said quietly. "We're entering hostile waters now." The first signs of the Empire's presence appeared soon after. Massive space stations loomed in the distance, surrounded by fleets of ships that dwarfed anything Clara had ever seen. The vessels were enormous, bristling with weapons and shield generators that glowed faintly in the darkness. Clara activated the ship's scanners, collecting data on every detail she could. The readings confirmed what Alan had feared. The Empire's technology was far ahead of humanity's. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we need to get closer," Clara replied. "But carefully." They maneuvered their ship toward one of the larger vessels, using its bulk to mask their presence. Sophia monitored the ships, systems from the engineering bay, ensuring that their cloaking device remained operational. Ethan kept watch on the sensors, alert for any sign of detection. As they drew nearer, Clara noticed something strange, a series of symbols etched into the hull of the Imperial ship. They looked like warnings, but their meaning was unclear. "Should try to board it," Clara said suddenly. "If we can get inside, we might learn more." Daniel hesitated. "That's risky. If they catch us—" "I know," Clara interrupted. "But we didn't come all this way to play it safe." After a brief discussion, the team agreed to proceed. Using a small shuttlecraft, they detached from the main ship and docked with the Imperial vessel. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with glowing panels. Clara led the way, her weapon drawn but concealed. The others followed closely behind, their footsteps muffled by the soft hum of the ship's engines. Inside, the atmosphere was oppressive. The walls were cold and metallic, and the air carried a faint chemical smell. Clara motioned for Ethan to hack into a nearby console, hoping to access the ship's database. His fingers flew across the keypad as lines of alien code scrolled across the screen. After several tense minutes, he managed to bypass the security protocols and download a trove of information. "This is incredible," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide with excitement. "Their weapons are unlike anything we've seen before." Before they could celebrate, however, alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed along the corridors, bathing everything in an eerie glow. "We've been spotted," Sophia said urgently. "We need to move." Clara nodded. "Stick together, follow me." They retraced their steps quickly, dodging patrols of armored soldiers who moved with mechanical precision. It was clear that the Empire took security seriously, and Clara knew they wouldn't escape without a fight. As they reached the airlock, a squad of guards appeared, blocking their path. Without hesitation, Clara fired her weapon, stunning the lead soldier and creating an opening for the team to slip through. Back aboard their shuttle, they launched just as the Imperial ship's turrets began to track them. Laser fire streaked past, narrowly missing their engines. Daniel pushed the throttle to maximum, weaving through the chaos as explosions erupted around them. Finally, they cleared the battle zone and re-entered the safety of open space. Once they were far enough away, Clara transmitted the stolen data back to Earth. She included a personal message for Alan, warning him about the Empire's capabilities and urging him to prepare for the worst. Then she set a course for home, knowing that their mission had only scratched the surface of what lay ahead. Back on Earth, Alan received Clara's transmission with a mixture of relief and dread. The intelligence she had gathered painted a grim picture. The Empire wasn't bluffing. They were preparing for war. Yet even armed with this knowledge, Alan struggled to rally support. Politicians continued to downplay the threat, dismissing Clara's findings as speculative at best, frustrated. But undeterred, Alan called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. "We need to start preparing defenses," he said firmly. "If we wait until they attack, it'll be too late." Some officers voiced concerns about appearing weak or provoking the Empire unnecessarily. Others argued that resources should be allocated elsewhere, pointing to ongoing projects and economic priorities. Alan listened patiently but refused to back down. "This isn't about politics," he said. "It's about survival." In the end, he managed to secure limited funding for additional training exercises and upgrades to the fleet's defensive systems. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Clara's team returned to Earth, exhausted but triumphant. Alan greeted them personally, thanking them for their bravery and vowing to use the intelligence they had gathered wisely. As the days turned into weeks, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Public opinion remained divided, with some growing, increasingly uneasy, while others clung to their belief that humanity was untouchable. Dr. Rachel Morgan continued to speak out, writing articles and giving interviews warning against complacency. Her words resonated with a small but growing number of people who recognized the potential gravity of the situation. For Alan, the weight of responsibility grew heavier with each passing day. He knew that the Empire's patience wouldn't last forever, and when they struck, humanity would need to be ready. But readiness required unity, and unity seemed further away than ever. One evening, as he stood alone on the observation deck of the Orbital Command Center, Alan gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human eyes, the Galactic Empire was preparing to make its move. Whether humanity would rise to meet the challenge remained to be seen. For now, all Alan could do was hope that when the time came, they would stand together, or risk falling apart. The Terran fleet was a marvel of human engineering, but even the most advanced machines could falter under pressure. As the Empire's ultimatum loomed closer, Commander Alan Hayes worked tirelessly to prepare his forces for the inevitable clash. The fleet's ships were retrofitted with upgraded shields and weapons based on the intelligence gathered by Lieutenant Clara Bennett's team. Engineers labored around the clock, their faces illuminated by the glow of welding torches and diagnostic screens. Despite these efforts, Alan couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Public opinion on Earth remained divided, though cracks in humanity's confidence were beginning to show. News outlets reported sightings of Imperial ships near human colonies, sparking panic among settlers who feared an imminent attack. Politicians scrambled to reassure citizens, but their words rang hollow against the backdrop of growing unease. Dr. Rachel Morgan continued her campaign to warn people about the dangers of underestimating the Empire. Her lectures drew crowds of curious listeners, many of whom left with furrowed brows and whispered concerns. Amid the chaos, Clara found herself back on active duty, assigned to lead a squadron of elite fighters. Her experience during the reconnaissance mission had earned her a reputation as one of the fleet's most capable officers. She spent her days training pilots, drilling them on maneuvers designed to exploit the weaknesses she had observed in Imperial vessels. The exercises were grueling, pushing both machines and humans to their limits, but Clara knew that survival would depend on precision and discipline. As preparations continued, Alan received word that the Empire had begun mobilizing its forces. Reports poured in from distant colonies describing massive fleets gathering at key locations across the galaxy. It was clear that Emperor Zorath intended to strike soon, and Alan had no choice but to meet him head-on. He chose a remote star system as the battleground, a stretch of space littered with asteroid fields and nebulae that could provide cover for the smaller, more agile Terran ships. The day of the battle arrived sooner than anyone expected. The Terran fleet assembled in formation, its ships gleaming like silver spears against the blackness of space. Alan stood on the bridge of the flagship Aurora, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Clara's squadron hovered nearby, engines idling as they awaited orders. The tension was palpable, a quiet hum of anticipation rippling through the ranks. Then it happened. The Empire's armada emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars with its sheer size. The ships were colossal, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that glowed ominously in the void. For a moment, there was silence, a collective intake of breath as both sides sized each other up. Then the first shots rang out, lighting up the battlefield with bursts of energy. Clara's squadron sprang into action, darting between the larger ships to disrupt the enemy's formations. Their fighters were nimble, weaving through the chaos with practiced ease. Clara led from the front, her ship dancing around laser fire as she targeted the Empire's supply lines. Explosions bloomed in her wake, sending debris spiraling into the darkness. Behind her, the Terran fleet engaged the Imperial warships, their cannons roaring as they exchanged volleys with the enemy. At first, humanity held its own. The Terran ships' superior speed and maneuverability allowed them to outflank the slower, bulkier Imperial vessels. Pilots cheered as they scored direct hits, their spirits buoyed by early successes. But the Empire wasn't fighting alone. It had numbers on its side. Wave after wave of reinforcements poured into the fray, overwhelming the defenders with sheer force. Alan watched the battle unfold with growing concern. The Empire's ships absorbed punishing blows without faltering, their shields holding firm against everything the Terran fleet threw at them. Worse still, their weapons were devastatingly effective, tearing through human defenses with frightening efficiency. One by one, Terran ships fell victim to the relentless assault, their hulls breached and crews lost to the cold embrace of space. Then came the moment that changed everything. A massive Imperial vessel moved to the forefront of the battle, its prow glowing with an ominous red light. Alan recognized it immediately, the superlaser that Clara had warned about. The weapon charged with a low hum, building power until it unleashed a beam of pure energy that obliterated an entire squadron of Terran ships in an instant. The shockwave rippled through the fleet, leaving stunned silence in its wake. "Pull back," Alan ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Regroup and fall back to defensive positions." Clara heard the command and relayed it to her squadron. They retreated reluctantly, breaking away from the fight to regroup with the rest of the fleet. The withdrawal was chaotic, with Imperial ships giving chase and picking off stragglers. By the time the Terran fleet had regrouped, nearly a third of its ships had been destroyed or disabled. On the bridge of the Aurora, Alan surveyed the damage with a heavy heart. The Empire's advantage was undeniable, and continuing the fight in this state would only lead to further losses. He called an emergency meeting with his senior staff to discuss their options. The mood was somber, with officers exchanging grim looks as they reviewed the casualty reports. "We can't win this way," Clara said finally, breaking the silence. "They're too strong." Alan nodded. "We need a new plan, something unexpected." After hours of debate, a risky strategy began to take shape. If they couldn't defeat the Empire in open battle, they would strike at its heart instead. Alan proposed a daring mission to infiltrate the Empire's capital world and cripple its infrastructure from within. It was a desperate gamble, but it might be their only chance to turn the tide of the war. Clara volunteered to lead the mission, knowing the risks involved. She assembled a small team of trusted operatives, including Daniel Brooks and Sophia Lane, who had proven themselves during the reconnaissance mission. Together, they devised a plan to sneak past the Empire's defenses using stolen codes and disguises. The goal was simple yet audacious. Plant explosives at key locations and create enough chaos to force the Empire to divert resources away from the front lines. As the team prepared for departure, Alan addressed the fleet one last time. "This isn't over," he said firmly. "We've faced challenges before and we'll face them again. Humanity doesn't give up. Not ever." His words resonated with the weary crew members, reigniting a spark of determination in their eyes. Though battered and bruised, the Terran fleet remained defiant, ready to fight another day. Meanwhile, Clara's team launched under the cover of darkness, their ship disappearing into the void as they set course for the Empire's homeworld. Back on Earth, news of the battle spread quickly, shattering the illusion of invincibility that had gripped humanity for so long. People gathered in streets and squares, watching live broadcasts of the conflict with a mixture of fear and awe. Some mourned the loss of loved ones, while others rallied behind calls for unity and resilience. Dr. Rachel Morgan watched the coverage with a sense of vindication, though it brought her little comfort. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she also believed that humanity had the strength to endure. For Alan, the weight of leadership felt heavier than ever. He had sent Clara and her team into unimaginable danger, knowing full well that they might not return. Yet he trusted them to succeed, just as he trusted the fleet to hold the line until reinforcements could arrive. As he gazed out at the stars, he reminded himself of what was at stake, not just victory, but survival itself. Somewhere beyond the reach of human eyes, the Empire waited, confident in its superiority. But humanity had always thrived in the face of adversity, finding ways to adapt and overcome. Whether they could do so now remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the fight was far from over. The mission to infiltrate the Empire's capital world was as dangerous as it was daring. Clara Bennett and her team knew they were walking into a hornet's nest, but they had no choice. The survival of humanity depended on their success. As their ship approached the planet, cloaked in stolen codes and disguised as an Imperial transport, Clara felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She glanced at her team, Daniel Brooks, Sophia Lane, and Ethan Grant, and saw the same mix of determination and fear reflected in their eyes. The Empire's homeworld was a sight to behold. From orbit, it looked like a jewel set against the blackness of space, its surface glittering with sprawling cities and towering structures that pierced the clouds. But beneath the beauty lay a society built on control and oppression. Clara studied the planet through the cockpit window, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. They had one chance to get this right, and failure wasn't an option. As they descended into the atmosphere, the ship's systems buzzed with activity. Sophia monitored the cloaking device, ensuring it remained operational while Daniel guided the vessel through layers of defense grids. Ethan kept watch on the sensors, alert for any sign of detection. So far, so good. The stolen codes worked perfectly, allowing them to slip past automated checkpoints without raising suspicion. Clara exhaled slowly, though she knew the hardest part was yet to come. Once they landed, the team disembarked cautiously, blending in with the bustle of workers and soldiers moving through the spaceport. Clara led the way. Her disguise, a uniform borrowed from an Imperial officer captured during the reconnaissance mission, helping her pass unnoticed. The others followed closely behind, carrying equipment hidden beneath their robes. Their goal was to reach the central power grid, a massive facility that supplied energy to the entire planet. If they could disable it, the Empire's defenses would collapse, giving the Terran fleet a fighting chance. The journey through the city was tense. Towering buildings loomed overhead, their facades adorned with images of Emperor Zorath, his stern face staring out over the populace like a god. Propaganda blared from speakers mounted on every corner, extolling the virtues of the Empire and warning citizens to remain loyal. Clara kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might scrutinize her too closely. Her heart pounded. In her chest, each step bringing them closer to their objective, and closer to discovery. They reached the outskirts of the power grid just as night fell, the city bathed in an eerie red glow from the emergency lights. Clara signaled for the team to stop, crouching behind a stack of crates to assess the situation. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons drawn and ready. Security cameras scanned the area relentlessly, leaving no blind spots. It was going to be tricky, but Clara had prepared for this moment. "Sophia," she whispered, "can you disable the cameras?" Sophia nodded, pulling a small device from her pack. She moved quickly, attaching it to a nearby terminal and typing furiously. Within seconds, the cameras froze, their feeds looping endlessly. The guards didn't notice, continuing their patrols as if nothing had changed. Clara gave the signal, and the team slipped past the outer defenses, heading straight for the main entrance. Inside, the facility was a labyrinth of corridors and control rooms. Clara consulted a map downloaded from the reconnaissance mission, guiding her team toward the core chamber where the power grid was housed. Along the way, they encountered several groups of engineers and technicians. Clara used her disguise to bluff her way through, claiming to be conducting routine inspections. The ruse worked, though each encounter left her nerves frayed. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast room filled with humming machinery and glowing conduits. In the center stood the reactor, its pulsating energy field illuminating the space with a soft blue light. Clara turned to Ethan. "You know what to do." Ethan nodded, unpacking the explosives they had brought with them. He worked quickly, placing charges at key points around the reactor. Clara kept watch, her weapon drawn as she scanned the room for threats. Time seemed to slow as the seconds ticked by, each movement amplified in the tense silence. Then came the sound they had been dreading, the alarm. Red lights flashed and klaxons blared as security forces converged on their position. Clara cursed under her breath. "We've been made! Move faster!" Ethan didn't need to be told twice. His hands flew across the detonator, arming the charges, as shouts echoed down the corridor. Guards burst into the chamber, weapons raised. Clara fired first, stunning several of them and creating a diversion for the team to escape. Bullets ricocheted off the walls as they sprinted toward the exit, explosions erupting behind them as the charges detonated. The blast shook the entire facility, sending shockwaves rippling through the ground. Clara and her team barely managed. to stay on their feet as alarms screamed and debris rained down around them. They pushed forward, determined to reach their ship before reinforcements arrived. Outside, chaos reigned. Power outages plunged parts of the city into darkness, and panic spread among the population. Clara used the confusion to their advantage, leading her team back to the spaceport. When they finally reached the ship, Daniel was already in the cockpit, engines warming up. "Let's go!" he shouted as the others climbed aboard. The ship lifted off just as Imperial forces closed in, laser fire streaking past as they accelerated into the sky. Clara collapsed into her seat, adrenaline coursing through her veins as the planet shrank behind them. Back on Earth, Commander Alan Hayes received word of the mission's success with a mixture of relief and pride. The power grid had been crippled, plunging the Empire into disarray. Reports poured in from across the galaxy, describing widespread unrest and logistical failures within Imperial territories. For the first time since the conflict began, humanity had struck a decisive blow, but the Empire wasn't finished yet. Emperor Zorath himself took command of the remaining forces, vowing to crush the rebellion once and for all. He summoned Alan to a final confrontation aboard his palace fortress, a floating citadel that served as both his home and command center. Alan accepted the challenge, knowing it was a trap, but seeing no other way to end the war. The meeting took place in a grand hall adorned with gold and marble, its ceiling soaring high above. Zorath sat on a throne carved from obsidian, his cold eyes fixed on Alan as he entered. "You have caused me great inconvenience," the Emperor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But your defiance ends here." Alan stood tall, meeting Zorath's gaze without flinching. "Your empire is built on fear and lies. Humanity doesn't bow to tyrants." With those words, the two men clashed in a fierce duel, their weapons sparking as they exchanged blows. Zorath was skilled, his movements precise and calculated, but Alan fought with the strength of someone who had everything to lose. Blow by blow, he pushed Zorath back until the Emperor stumbled, his guard faltering. Seizing the opportunity, Alan delivered a final strike, knocking Zorath to the ground. As the Emperor lay defeated, his forces crumbled around him. Without their leader, the Empire unraveled, its armies surrendering or retreating. News of the victory spread quickly, sparking celebrations across Earth and its colonies. Humanity had triumphed not through brute force, but through ingenuity and resilience. Clara and her team returned to Earth as heroes, greeted by cheering crowds and grateful leaders. Alan stood beside them, humbled by the sacrifices made along the way. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but humanity had proven it could adapt and overcome. As the dust settled, Alan couldn't help but reflect on the lessons learned. Pride could be a strength, but humility was equally important. Together they had faced the greatest challenge of their time and emerged stronger for it. For now, peace reigned. But Alan knew that vigilance would always be necessary. The stars held countless mysteries, and humanity's journey was far from over. The Empire's collapse was swift and chaotic, a testament to how fragile even the mightiest structures could be when their foundation crumbled. With Emperor Zorath defeated and his forces in disarray, the Galactic Empire unraveled like a thread pulled from a tapestry. News of the Emperor's fall spread rapidly through Imperial territories, sparking revolts among oppressed populations who had long suffered under his rule. Cities once loyal to the throne erupted in rebellion, their streets filled with people, tearing down statues of Zorath and replacing them with symbols of freedom. For humanity, this marked not just a victory, but a turning point, a moment when they proved that unity and courage could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. Back on Earth, the celebrations were electric. Crowds gathered in every major city, waving flags and chanting slogans as fireworks lit up the night sky. The Terran fleet became a symbol of hope and resilience, its ships parading through orbit in a display of triumph. Clara Bennett and her team were hailed as heroes, their daring mission to infiltrate the Empire's capital world immortalized in news broadcasts and social media posts. People spoke of their bravery with awe, though Clara herself remained humble, deflecting praise onto her teammates and the countless others who had contributed to humanity's success. Commander Alan Hayes stood quietly amidst the festivities, watching as humanity came together in ways he hadn't seen before. Politicians who had once dismissed the Empire's threat now praised the fleet's efforts, while citizens embraced a newfound sense of solidarity. Even Dr. Rachel Morgan, whose warnings had initially fallen on deaf ears, found herself invited to speak at conferences and ceremonies, her insights finally recognized as prescient. Yet despite the joy surrounding him, Alan couldn't shake the weight of everything they had endured. Victory had come at a cost, ships lost, lives sacrificed, and he knew better than anyone that such scars didn't heal overnight. In the weeks that followed, the Terran fleet worked tirelessly to stabilize regions affected by the Empire's collapse. Colonies that had been under Imperial control were liberated, their inhabitants greeted by relief convoys carrying food, medicine, and supplies. Engineers and diplomats traveled alongside military personnel, helping rebuild infrastructure and establish new governments based on principles of cooperation rather than domination. It was a daunting task, but one that humanity approached with determination and compassion. Alan often reminded his officers that winning the war wasn't enough. They had to win the peace too. Clara spent much of her time assisting with these efforts, traveling between liberated worlds to assess their needs and offer support. Her experiences during the conflict had changed her, sharpening her instincts and deepening her understanding of what it meant to lead. She no longer saw herself as just a pilot or tactician, but as someone capable of making a difference beyond the battlefield. On one such mission, she encountered a young girl named Lily, whose family had survived years of oppression under the Empire. Lily handed Clara a small drawing of a starship surrounded by smiling faces, saying simply, "Thank you." That moment stayed with Clara long after she left the planet, reminding her why they had fought so hard. Meanwhile, Alan focused on preparing humanity for the future. The Empire's defeat didn't mean the galaxy was safe. It only meant the rules of engagement had shifted. New challenges would arise, whether from remnants of the Empire or other civilizations lurking in unexplored corners of space. To ensure humanity wouldn't be caught off guard again, Alan advocated for increased investment in research and development, pushing for advancements in technology and diplomacy alike. He also emphasized the importance of alliances, urging leaders to foster relationships with other species who shared humanity's vision of peace and progress. As part of these efforts, a delegation was sent to explore potential partnerships with neighboring systems. Among them was Lieutenant Daniel Brooks, whose calm demeanor and quick thinking made him an ideal ambassador. During one meeting with a race known as the Valens, beings with translucent skin and bioluminescent markings, he discovered a shared interest in trade and cultural exchange. The Valens admired humanity's ingenuity and expressed willingness to collaborate, provided mutual respect was maintained. By the end of the mission, tentative agreements were reached, paving the way for cooperation that could benefit both parties. Back home, life slowly returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as possible after such monumental events. Schools reopened, businesses resumed operations, and families reunited with loved ones who had served in the fleet. Yet reminders of the war lingered everywhere, memorials dedicated to fallen soldiers, documentaries chronicling key battles, and debates about how best to honor those who had given everything. These conversations weren't always easy, but they were necessary, forcing humanity to confront difficult truths while celebrating its achievements. One evening, Alan found himself standing on the observation deck of the Orbital Command Center, gazing out at the stars. Beside him was Clara, who had joined him for a rare moment of quiet reflection. Neither spoke for a long time, content to let the silence stretch between them. Finally, Clara broke it. "Do you think we'll ever face something like this again?" Alan considered her question carefully. "Probably," he admitted. "The galaxy is full of mysteries, some beautiful and some dangerous. But if we remember what we've learned, if we stay vigilant and work together, we'll be ready." Clara nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant constellations. "I guess that's all we can do." They stood there for a while longer, two figures, silhouetted against the endless expanse of space. Behind them lay Earth, vibrant and alive, a testament to humanity's ability to adapt and persevere. Ahead of them stretched the unknown, a vast frontier waiting to be explored. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Alan and Clara knew they wouldn't face them alone. Humanity had proven its strength, not just in battle but in its capacity to grow and change, and as long as that spirit endured, the stars would never feel quite so distant.